All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive into something that's at the very core of so many relationships. It's that tricky question. When does intense care cross the line and become, well, control? Let's figure it out.
This quote from Psychology Today just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It frames this whole thing so perfectly. Controlling behavior, it's not about strength. It's actually the opposite. It's what happens when someone feels so powerless that the only tool they think they have left is to scare someone else into doing what they want.
And that really is the million-dollar question, right? So many of us have been there, especially when a relationship is new and emotions are running high. You ask yourself, are all those texts just because they care so much? Or is this something else? It's a super blurry line, and it can be tough to see clearly.
So if we look at the psychology behind it, a key concept here is something called emotional dysregulation. Now, it's a fancy term, but the idea is simple. The reaction just doesn't fit the situation. It's completely out of proportion. The pressure cooker analogy is perfect. All these smaller, maybe ignored feelings of hurt or fear just build and build until, boom, an explosion. And that explosion is often a big, controlling reaction meant to take over.
Okay, so how do we actually tell the difference? In the real world, in our own dating lives, how do we spot those red flags and not mistake them for romance? Let's break down what you should be looking for.
And this is probably the most important thing to remember. It is not about one single incident. I mean, come on, everybody has a bad day, right? We all mess up. What we're talking about here are patterns. It's the stuff that happens over and over again. That's what really tells you who a person is and how they're going to show up in a relationship.
Yeah, and when you look at the research on what makes people end relationships, the same things pop up again and again. These are the big deal breakers. We're talking about extreme jealousy, anger problems, someone who just brushes off your passions, or someone who's so clingy you can't breathe. These aren't just little personality quirks, They're serious warning signs that things could get rocky.
This right here sums it up perfectly. You have to ask yourself, is this a pattern, something that's just part of who they are, or was that a one-off performance, a bad moment brought on by stress? Figuring out the difference between those two is absolutely crucial if you want to understand if your relationship is healthy.
Let's walk through an example to see how this plays out in real life. You've got this couple, Angel and Mark. A conflict pops up. What happens next? Angel has a huge emotional outburst. Mark's reaction? He completely shuts down and leaves. That withdrawal sends Angel into a panic, so she apologizes and things go back to normal. But here's the kicker. The actual problem never got solved, so the whole destructive cycle is just sitting there, ready to start all over again.
So, okay, we see the cycle, but just seeing it isn't enough to stop it, right? To really make a change, you've got to go deeper. You have to ask, why is this happening? Where does this all start?
Well, a lot of the research points to something called attachment theory. The idea is pretty straightforward, actually. Our first relationships, with our parents or caregivers, basically create a map, a blueprint for all of our future relationships. And if that first map was drawn from a place of insecurity, well, it can make navigating relationships as an adult a whole lot harder.
And the impact of this is huge. People with these insecure attachment styles tend to feel less satisfied in their relationships. They might always feel like their partner is pulling away, or they can get incredibly anxious and upset when they're alone. And what's really interesting and maybe a little worrying is that research is showing that these insecure styles are actually on the rise, especially with young adults. All right, now this is where it gets really fascinating. Because this isn't just about psychology or our childhoods. There's a biological side to this too. It's literally happening inside our brains. So, deep in your brain, you've got this little thing called the amygdala. Think of it as your emotional command center, or like a super sensitive alarm system. But here's the thing, it doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's covered in receptors for hormones, like testosterone. That means your hormones can literally dial the emotional intensity up or down. Now check this out. Research shows that testosterone's effect on the brain's logic center, the frontal cortex, is different for men and women. For men, more testosterone seems to strengthen the connection between that emotional amygdala and the rational frontal cortex. But for women, it was the opposite. It was linked to a weaker connection. What does that suggest? Well, it could mean that for some women with higher testosterone, it might literally be harder on a biological level to put the brakes on those really intense emotions. Okay, we've looked at the warning signs, the psychology behind them, and even what's going on in the brain. So, what now? How do we actually use this information to get out of those controlling dynamics and build a connection that's genuinely healthy and supportive?
Well, experts have some really practical advice. It's all about small, positive actions.
For example, when there's a conflict, instead of pulling away, you lean in, you turn toward your partner, and instead of listing all the things you don't want, you state clearly what you do want. It sounds simple, but these little shifts are what build real trust and a deep connection over time.
You know, a huge piece of the puzzle is your mindset. Are you in the destiny camp, where you believe you just have to find the one and everything will be perfect? Or are you in the growth camp, where you understand that a good relationship takes actual work and effort? Making that shift from believing in destiny to believing in growth, honestly, it changes everything.
And if you need proof that the growth mindset is the way to go, look at this number. We all know that initial spark, that intense attraction, is what starts so many relationships. But when you look at the data for successful long-term marriages, less than 20% say that initial spark was a key reason they stayed together. Less than 20%.
So what does that tell us? It tells us that the initial chemistry, that whole hormonal fireworks show, that's just the opening act. The main event, the part that leads to real, lasting happiness, is the work you put in together, day after day, to build something real. So, we'll leave you with a question to think about. What patterns in your own life might you be mistaking for passion? Because in the moment, when emotions are high, it is so easy to confuse control with care. The real test is to step back, look beyond that one performance, and really see the pattern for what it is. Thanks for joining us.